Fatty livers come up a couple times. Let's talk about where along the continuum of insulin resistance that typically starts, and then the mechanism.
I don't have a lot of good data. Fatty liver, we know, like if you have a big belly and high insulin levels, you're 95% sure you got a fatty liver. But other than that, there's no simple diagnostic test. You really don't. I mean, some of the more secure ways is to do like a biopsy, but you really don't want to go poking holes in your liver if you don't have to. It's quite invasive and there's some risks and stuff. So they don't really test it. They can do it with ultrasound, but again, it's not conclusive. And early stages of insulin resistance don't produce like a full-blown fatty liver. So in my mind, it's more of a continuum, just like insulin is. So I think that we have a fatty liver in proportion to our insulin levels. And early on, it's not a big deal, but the further we go, that fat-packed liver can start malfunctioning because it's just too full of fat.
And isn't it true as we become metabolically unhealthy, the pancreas can take on fat too?
Yes, all organs can basically. And some people think that type 2 diabetes is when the pancreas fails, but that is actually a totally different story. Most type 2 diabetics have a perfectly functioning pancreas. And this is evidenced by the fact that if you measure their insulin, they're very, very high levels. So their pancreas is fully capable of producing insulin. It's just that the cells are so resistant that no matter how much insulin, it doesn't really do the job.
When it comes to fatty liver, fatty pancreas, to reverse those, is the protocol the same as what we've been talking about? Well, we haven't really got into it in depth, but when we reverse insulin resistance, is it all the same, or is there specifics depending on what you're trying to get?
No, there's some tissues that are slightly different. Like there's more insulin receptors and more cortisol receptors in the visceral organs than there are in subcutaneous fat. So those tissues turn over a little faster. They're a little faster to accumulate fat, and they're a little faster actually to let go of fat. But other than that, the mechanism is the same, that there is only one way. If insulin created the problem of putting too much fat in storage, the only solution is to lower insulin by whatever means we need to do that. And we'll talk about those, I'm sure. But like I mentioned, the medical solution is to give people more insulin. It's totally inconceivable. It's completely absurd to me. Once you really understand the model and the mechanism, that the problem is too much insulin, then why are we giving people more? Because you're controlling blood sugar at a level, you're making cardiovascular disease and dementia and all the other issues get worse. And the solution is relatively simple.
Well, to me, when you start giving insulin, you're extending out what the body's already been doing for that 10, 15 years. You're continuing to keep blood glucose at bay, but you're ramping up that insulin even more, causing all kinds of problems and not even addressing the root.
Yeah. To me, I use the word congested a lot when I try to describe these things. Again, our ancestors, they put some things in storage and they took them out. We put something into a pantry and we take it out. If we never take anything out, it gets congested. It gets clogged up. We have to have a turnover, an exchange. And that's what this is about. And if you think about people when they get overweight and they get swollen and their bodies stop functioning, we've overfed, we've congested the body. And we have to understand that it's not about willpower, right? You can't just say, I'm going to eat less, because your body wants to survive. Your body is going to, if you're high insulin, you will get hungry. Insulin resistance makes you hungry. So you can't attack the problem at the level of willpower. There's like one in 100 can do that, right? Those, I don't know how they do it. They just decide, and I'm going to stop eating. I don't care if I suffer, and they'll pull it off. But we know the success record of dieting. 98% of people fail. They go on a diet, they get off a diet because it was horrible. And that's not the way. You can't solve the problem with what's the word? Deprivation. You can't deprive yourself and suffer and solve the problem.
Let's bring in visceral fat. And this is the cousin to liver fat, pancreas fat. It's in the same area, but now we're talking about the fat within the abdominal cavity. You mentioned it quickly. Let's talk about what that is and why it's so dangerous.
It has more. I think the biggest thing is, if there's a disease called Cushing's syndrome. And those are usually people with like an adrenal tumor. That's where the adrenal glands, that's where cortisol is made. If you have a tumor there, that it could be a benign tumor, but it's an endocrine tumor that makes a hormone, namely cortisol, and it just keeps overproducing it. So you have extremely high levels all the time. Well, those people, they have all the extremes of what cortisol does. Okay, they get a round, they call moon face. They get a buffalo hump because the fat accumulates on the back of the upper back. They get stretch marks and striations because the skin is protein, and the cortisol tries to make glucose. That's the number one reason for cortisol. Is it's a stress hormone. When we have stress, we want more glucose. So cortisol tells the body to make more glucose. Well, part of the way it tells you to get glucose by giving you cravings, but it also does it by breaking down protein. So chronic high levels of cortisol will break down protein. It'll break down skin. It will break down muscle. So you're cannibalizing your skin and your muscles. You get saggy, brittle skin. If you get a bruise, it tends to get exceedingly large and heal slowly. They get huge bellies. They get skinny legs because the cortisol eats up all the muscles in the large muscles, like the butt and the thighs. And that's what cortisol does. So belly fat is an indication of insulin, but also very much of cortisol, because belly fat, visceral fat, has more cortisol receptors and more insulin receptors. So visceral fat is associated with all these destructive stress responses. And I think that's one reason that the visceral fat is considered dangerous. I don't think per se that it's necessarily, it does have some different signaling properties, but I think the main thing is that it indicates that we have more cortisol in the body as well.
For somebody who feels they might be in that position, too much cortisol, how do they assess? And then how do they address that piece?
That's a good question, because cortisol, it's kind of hard to test. The best test is like a 24-hour saliva gathering test. But even so, it's not all that reliable or specific. So I think if you have these signs, then I think you can assume that you have too much cortisol. And I would just encourage people, regardless, to do something about stress, because you have it, whether you know it or not, whether you feel stressed or not. We live in a world with so many deadlines and so much overload that your body is kind of, we get used to it and it becomes our default. And I often talk about the triad of health, which is you have a chemical aspect to your body, that's nutrition, biochemistry. It's all the positive stuff you should eat to give your body nutrients, and it's all the toxins you should avoid that interferes. And then we have a structural component, which is posture and movement. Your body is made to be, it functions best in a certain posture, right? If we're slouching, if we're sitting all the time, the body doesn't work as well. It affects the signals, it affects the feedback to the brain. So trauma and being a couch potato, that interferes with your brain function. So if you have an accident where you start limping or you're not walking properly, you changed your movement patterns. And it's not like that's the biggest problem you have in life, but it's one of them, right? It contributes to your overall signal pattern in the body. So go do what you can. It's like, get a chiropractor, get some physical therapy, do some stretching, do some Pilates, and get as close back to full function as you can. And then it's the emotional part, which is usually where we put stress. And the way I look at it is these are necessities. They're not optional, right? Your body depends on good nutrition. It depends on good movement. It depends on a good mood. That's where we function. A bad mood will shut down everything in your body. And like we just talked about with cortisol, that's just one part of it. That's just one hormone. But in the ways that the body allocates resources and the way it heals versus breaks things down, it has everything to do with our emotional state. So I think if we're interested in health, we should put equal thirds on those three, on our biochemistry, on our movement and posture, and on our emotional state. And we should set aside time. We should watch a funny movie. We should read a book that makes us feel good, an uplifting book. We should do breathing exercises. We should meditate. We should pay attention to how we feel. Like, you go through the day and you notice, how am I feeling? Is this how I want to feel? If my cells were listening to me right now, to my internal conversation, to my emotional state, would my body be more inclined to heal or more inclined to put out a fire and break down? So the thing that we want to do is realize, pay attention to how we feel, realize that it is a real thing, and make it absolutely as important as what we eat. And then we start looking for and using different techniques and methods and meditation to give our brains and our bodies that state of healing, that state of bliss and joy that it needs on a regular basis.
You gave a number of examples, but I want to stick on the emotional piece. For you personally, if you're pushing it too hard, stressed, not getting enough sleep, working extra hours trying to get your video ready for Friday morning, what will you do to slow down and dissipate that stress?
I don't do enough, like all of us, I think. But just breathing exercises. As you're laying in bed, last thing at night, first thing in the morning, just take some slow breaths and focus on your state? Do you feel tense? Do you have thoughts racing around in your mind? Are you dreading the day? Are you looking forward to it? Are you anticipating trouble, or are you visualizing the day go well? Those are just little things. And then if you focus on your breath, you put a hand on your belly and you feel the hand rise with the belly, and you breathe 5 seconds in and 5 to 6 seconds out. And the first 4 seconds, you let the belly do the breath, and then you let it expand into your chest just a little bit, and then you just release it. So just doing 1 minute of that breathing is a reset. It changes your mental focus. It interrupts whatever stress pattern is going. And then what I'd like to do more, which I've had periods where I do better, is like a full 20, 30 minutes of a dedicated meditation where I sit and just work on silencing the mind. And the way I do it is I focus on space. I just visualize space around me, visualize space in different parts of my body. Because what happens, and this they've done studies on, is the concept, the image of space. When you can feel space, it automatically puts your brain into alpha brainwaves, which is like 8 to 12 hertz, 8 to 12 cycles per second, which is a very relaxed state. It's right above like meditation. Meditation tends to go down a little bit lower, but you could use, like almost instantaneously, you could bring it from beta, which is often in the 20 hertz range, and bring it down to about 12, 8 to 12, and you have a totally different experience.
Since you made it to the end of this clip, I know you're going to love the full episode. Click here to watch. I'll see you over there.
Basically, everything else you can think of gets worse with insulin resistance. That's why it's the #1 health problem. And we've never seen anything like it, where the